all decisions of this board is final. If there's anyone aggrieved by the decision of this board, they may appeal to circuit court within 15 days of the board's decision. Also, no permits or license can be issued until that 15-day appeal period is expired and no appeal has been filed. For information regarding the board's decision or an appeal to circuit court or an appeal to circuit court, the Office of Land Use Administration will be your contact. As you come to the podium, we'll ask that you direct your questions to the board, not to the staff or someone in the audience, that you also turn off any electronic devices or put them on silence. And I remind the board as well also to make sure your microphone is on when you make a comment or question. All right, and sometimes we have to be a little bit more strict on the time, but it is a 5-minute time period. Pick your top 3, 4, I guess it's 4, right? 4 individuals to speak on either on behalf of an application or in opposition. So we try not to have redundancy of the same comments if possible. All right, let's start with the roll call. Mr. Davis? Here. Mr. Coleman? Here. Mr. Metcalf? Here. Mr. Burrows? Here. Mr. Milling? Here. Mr. Golden? Here. And I'm William Guest. We have all 7 members present. Takes 5, a supermajority to approve a motion. And we have Mr. Anderson here as our counselor. So we'll go in order of the agenda, which is initially a holdover for 6020, 3149, 1870. Case, I guess this is for 501 and 581 Cochran Causeway. Do we have anyone here representing the applicant?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Stephen Harvey. I'm with the firm McDowell Knight here in Mobile, 11 North Water Street, 13th floor. I'm just here to ask for another 6-month holdover. I've been sending letters in to the Land Use Department asking for holdovers, but Bert Hoffman asked that I come down today to ask for it in person.
We appreciate that.
If I need to go into the background of all this, I'm more than willing to do so.
We've heard it a few times.
It's been so long, I mean.
It's in, still waiting for a court review?
Well, and it's moving at a snail's pace, yes, to answer your question, but the judge recused herself about 6 weeks ago. So we're getting a new judge and perhaps starting somewhat all over.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant's rep? Okay, anyone in the audience, we just, as a formality, either for or against this application? Okay, we have none for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, entertain a motion for a holdover, 6 months.
Mr. Chair, a quick question. With the history of it, does it make sense to hold it over any longer than that? I mean, is there a reason we go in 6-month increments on this one?
We can, as long as y'all, well, I mean, I think if we go past a year, I think that's getting a little out there.
I'll defer to Doug on that.
Yeah, it has been assigned to Judge Brooks. We have a status hearing, I think a week from this Friday, and hopefully it now will get moving again. But yeah, if you want to push it out a year, that might be advisable.
Okay. Well,
was that your question? A year?
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, you know, we've done this a bunch of times, and since it seems like there are a lot of moving parts and outside of a lot of people's control, was there any downside in doing it a little bit longer than 6 months?
6 or 9.
No, you think it might start getting a little traction now and moving along a little more?
9 months, 6.
Okay.
okay. Did we have a motion already? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we hold this over for 9 months.
Okay. Second. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your project here. All right, we'll go to our next, which is application 6172. This is 1956 Grider, I hope I pronounced that right, Road, Eric and Cassandra Washington. Yes, sir. You'll give us your name and address for the record, sir?
Eric Washington, my wife is not here, but it's 1956 Crider Road.
Okay, and the staff's recommended for denial. You want to tell the board why we ought to consider your variance, please?
Well, I have two boys in college, and both of them has families and stuff, and we're just dividing the house where we have different power, because both of them got a job, and one want to pay their own, the other want to pay on and stuff. We just dividing the power. That's all we're doing.
Okay, is
We
that,
done remodel it and everything.
it was a single-family home at one time?
Yes, but it was a big old part that was added onto the house before we bought it. And the only thing is dividing it is a breezeway, and we have already remodeled this side and remodeled that side. Only thing we're doing is just dividing the power.
Okay, so it only had one power source initially.
Yes.
Now you're adding a second
Yes.
utility
Mhm.
source.
It has separate bathrooms, the whole 9 yards.
Okay. All right, any other questions of the board for the applicant?
I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Oh, you say that your sons used to stay there, is that what you're saying?
Pardon me?
You said your sons are gone and you coming home, or?
Both of them, I own it, me and my wife own it and stuff, but both of them are in college.
Uh-huh.
One is at South and one is at Bishop. But one don't want to pay what the other one do, so I can.
Well, the question really I got for you, you got close by neighbors?
Yes, sir.
Or they're aware that you asking for this?
Yes, sir. We got a
Zoning change?
zoning thing out there and everything and stuff, and yeah,
No one's
know about
objecting
it.
to it? No one's objecting to that request?
No, sir.
Okay, how long have you owned the home?
7. Well, I could be wrong now, but I think it's either 6, 7, or 8 years, something like that.
Okay, and at the time you purchased it, you knew it was zoned for single residential at the time, right?
At the first time, yes, sir.
Okay, what you're trying to do is take care of a family situation by subdividing it into two.
That's right.
Yeah,
Because, well, I guess what other people do, that's their business, but down the road, it's the same thing, and that's what we was trying to do.
Okay. All right, once again, any other questions of the board for the applicant?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Washington, I guess in reading the application, it looks like you've already done the work and that you're coming in after the fact to ask for a variance. Did you know that you required a variance, or was it something you did thinking that you were within the?
I didn't know we even had to have all that stuff, so, but I did come down and apply for a variance and the whole 9 yards.
Bert, how was the city notified? Was it, or how did the city become aware of it?
Oh, well, Mr. Washington first applied for non-conforming status, and we researched going back to 1980 in our city directories and could find no history of this site ever having two dwelling units, either two physically separate buildings or one building with two dwelling units in it. So that's, once we reviewed that and told him that we could not approve the non-conforming status, that's when he applied for the variance request.
And what triggered him coming in to request a non-conforming status?
Well, I think he decided that he wanted to try and use this property to allow two dwelling units. I don't think there was any permit or any complaint or anything, so.
So at that time, there were not two dwellings on the property? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, from reading the application, it seemed like to me that the dwellings were built on the property prior to any type
yes,
of interaction with
the
the
structure
city.
that's on the property is this structure here, and it has existed for many years prior to Mr. Washington purchasing it. And what he has done apparently is divided it so that this portion will be a dwelling unit and this portion will be a dwelling unit.
Okay.
Yeah, they were already,
Oh,
this
I got
is
you.
all
The structures
connected.
were already there. It's
Yes.
just been divided in such a way.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions of the board for the applicant? All right, if you'll have a seat, sir. Anyone in favor of this application that wishes to speak at this time? Anyone in opposition? Okay. Discussion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I got a question for Bert, if you don't mind.
Please.
Bert, would this application change the character of the neighborhood, in your opinion? I know what y'all are recommending, but would, in your opinion, if you want to give me that opinion, would it substantially change the character of the neighborhood?
That's really hard to say. It's next to, it looks like there's a house to the south of it and then houses to the north of it. And it may be that the property immediately to the north may have a mobile home. I can't really tell based on this aerial, but the only thing that I might have concern is that I don't believe any permits were obtained for any of the work, so.
Well, bear in mind, I want your opinion now. I'm not soliciting anything other than your opinion.
That is what I'm providing.
All right. Any further questions? Mr. Washington, can I ask you one additional question? If you'll come back to the podium, please. I want to be real clear on this. When you purchased the property, initially you purchased it for one of your sons originally?
Actually, yes, for one of my sons, but then they decided they wanted to go, one wanted to stay at, is it the curve or the edge or something on Osha Road?
Yeah.
Now they decided they wanted to move at the house. So one is at South and one is at Bishop. So
I understand. I guess I'm trying to be clear that you knew this was a single-family home when you bought it, but you're trying to take care of a situation with your family, and that's the reason why you're making it into a duplex.
well,
Correct.
actually, the property, the house and everything was already there. Only thing I'm doing is just dividing the power.
Was there two families living there?
Yeah, well, from my understanding, when I bought it in foreclosure and stuff, the family that was there, it was a mother-in-law suite there, and it was the house.
How many mailboxes do they have?
One mailbox.
So it's been a single family, more or less.
As far as I know now.
Okay. You understand the scope of what we're trying to
Yeah, I
determine
understand.
whether there is a true hardship with this property or non-conforming, which I don't feel that it's been non-conforming. It's been a single-family home for some time, and you're just trying to change the character of it.
Yeah, because I'd have remodeled everything.
Yeah, and we understand your dilemma now is that you've now done that, and you've got to ask for forgiveness or a variance from this board. So, okay, all right, that concludes my questions.
All right, thanks, Don.
All right.
One other question, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Did you say you have two electricities there?
What is that?
Two electricities? Your electrical?
No, I don't have two. That's what I'm saying. I
You
got
just a
one.
single electrical?
One is single electricity, but this part it's got its own kitchen, bathroom, and everything over here. This part has its own kitchen, bathroom, bedrooms, and everything over here. It was built like that before I even bought it.
Okay, I get it now.
Yeah,
I was a little
I mean, it's everything.
They can't be separately metered
My problem.
without two addresses. So
Okay.
that's what he's trying to do. And to answer your question from earlier, the impact it would have on the neighborhood, probably nothing now because it's family. But once his sons move out and he could rent it to a non-family member, that's when it really becomes maybe an issue. So
I got you.
Y'all could, I discussed it with Burton, if y'all were
Okay.
thinking about approving it, y'all could approve it with the condition that at no time could it be leased out to a non-family member.
Hey,
I got you.
I'm all for
I
that.
got it.
Go ahead.
or you can leave it the way it is and just let your boys sort out the electrical bill.
That's almost like pulling hen's teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Metcalf?
another question for you, Mr. Washington. So, as an alternative, you could keep the power in your name and collect from both sons. Are you saying that's,
Well, you
That's
got-
what you're trying to avoid.
You done forgot from hen's teeth to elephant teeth. I ain't even trying to get that out of there.
I got you.
Well, all right, well, we'll conclude our questions. Thank you. All right. As noted, the staff recommends denial. Whether a hardship can be demonstrated, and I think they've done their due diligence to try to find non-conforming use. I don't know that they found such, but it sounds as if they haven't, so. All right, Chair, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move for approval.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Any conditions, Mr. Chair?
I have a motion to
That
approve.
remain at the same family unit.
Second?
I have a motion to approve keeping it a single family,
Yes.
limited, no rental, no,
That's right, single family unit, no rental.
okay.
What is the motion? To allow it to be a duplex, but only rented to family members?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
I say opposed. I think the motion carries. We had, what, 6-4, 1 against? Okay. All right. Mr. Washington, your variance was approved.
Mr. Chairman, just, if you
Yes.
don't mind, just make sure that he understands what we just did.
Yeah, well, I think he has a, what, 15-day period?
Yeah, he has to wait
get permits?
15 days before he
No,
can...
that's not what I mean. I'm talking about that the motion was to approve, subject to it only being your family.
That's right.
Okay,
Only
I just
my
want to make sure
boys.
that you heard that.
That's right. Only my boys, so they can be out of me and my wife's hair.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then you'll have to wait 15 days before you can apply for the electrical permit to separate it.
that's good. Okay.
All right. Thank you for the clarification, Mr.
All right.
Metcalf.
Now I'm taking any kind of people that want to help or whatever on this now.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks now.
All right. Application 6173, 6046, 5840, 5113, 4902, 4883. This is 1714 Dolphin Street, and Mr. Millings is recusing himself. So we still have 6 members to vote. That allows us to have a quorum. If the applicant's rep will come forward, please.
Hello, my name is Courtney Hilly, and I'm the owner of Shalora, the owner of the coffee shop at 1714 Dolphin Street,
Okay.
or
And I
to be
think
at 1714.
you
And I wanted
you
to,
handed this out too, correct?
yes, sir. So I wanted to request that we make an amendment to the application, as mentioned in that narrative. I know that this was to be pushed to the June 5th, I think is what it said. And so we wanted to kind of get everything together so as to move it quickly. I have things written down here.
So you're not requesting holdover to the next meeting? You wish to proceed today, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If possible, yes, sir.
All right.
Along with that, we have the site plan that you guys already approved in 2013. But I have included, even below that, letters from our neighbors approving that we be there with the roasting as it is. So yeah, the narrative just mentions that in the roasting and the live performances are not going to be like Moe's Barbecue or Bluegill. It's like a small setup in the corner, a person playing guitar, maybe once or twice a month. It will not require a sound system, and it shouldn't be heard outside of the shop. And the coffee roasting that we're asking to do is small batch and light roasted, so it shouldn't erode or not erode, but have the strong smell everywhere. But even if it did, we do have the approval of the neighbors for that as well.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant? There's a lot of narrative
I'm
in
sorry.
here, so-
I don't want to waste your time, but I did want to be thorough.
Okay, Bert, they have a revised site plan that's been submitted?
Or I believe the site plan is.
Well,
Excuse me. Let me-
we did receive one from Mr. Stone, but I haven't seen what you guys have received today, so.
Okay, I don't see a site plan in here.
Well, Mr. Stone did provide one via email last week once we published the report. So we do have one on file. We didn't bring it down with us, though.
Okay. Let's see here. Narrative justifying use of the property for coffee roasting. I think we've got that. And minimize noise of surrounding properties of live music, and you've stated it'll be internal
Right,
within the
yes, sir.
facility only.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think you've addressed the questions that they've posted on their narrative. All right, any questions of the board for the applicant? All right, if you'll have a seat, I take it a few of you are here for this application. Anybody else wish to speak at this time?
I just want to speak.
Hey, you got to come to the podium, sir.
Sorry.
Name and address.
Steve Stone, Dakin Street Architects, 70 Joachim. The site plan, I believe, was passed out. I think all 7 received this.
Well, let me read
This site
my
plan?
package here.
It was.
Let me see.
If it wasn't,
I apparently didn't get one.
Okay.
So.
they don't like you. So this was the exact site plan that we prepared back in 2013 when it was a restaurant, and that was approved back then. So this just shows the shared parking with the credit union next door. So I just wanted to confirm that.
Okay, Bert, do you have a copy?
Bird here.
We do have this in the file from the original application when the first restaurant went in, and then Mr. Stone, like I said, did email it to me last week. I have been behind in opening some of my emails. So.
Okay.
I bug Bird a lot. All right, that's all I needed to say. Any
All right,
questions?
hold on, any questions? Okay, anyone else at this time wish to speak on behalf of the application? All right, do we have anybody in opposition today? And you have neighbors that have shown interest. I don't see anyone in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff. Does this satisfy your concerns?
Well, it is depicting the site as was previously approved, which would be the same essentially as what would be required with this application at hand. So this would satisfy that requirement in terms of site plan. Again, the narrative I haven't seen, but if you are satisfied with the narrative that has been provided, then that is sufficient.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If you'll come back to the podium, I want to make sure the board has
Yes, sir.
clarity on this. So what will be the limited hours for your, any kind of live music?
So the hours that we are allowed to be within are end at 10, so we'd be closing at 9. And we would only have live music probably around 6. Not really anything late night, and it would just be very small.
And as you stated, it will be only inside. So we won't
Yes,
have to
sir.
worry about it
Yes,
being an
sir.
exterior noise issue.
Correct. I'm not even expecting to use a sound system, and so I just wanted to make sure that we were covered just in case.
And the building previously was a restaurant, correct?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Did they have a hood system, exhaust system for their kitchen?
Yes, sir. That is all
So you're
there.
going to utilize something similar for the roasting?
Yes, sir. The roasting machine is actually very small. It doesn't even require a hood. We considered even getting an electrical one that didn't even need a vent for how small of roasting batches we will be doing. So it's not like a big Leroy Hill Carpe Diem kind of thing.
Okay,
Yeah, it's much smaller.
all right. Once again, any questions? Okay, thank you again.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. All right. It appears staff's questions have been addressed. Bert, anything else before we proceed? Make sure I got. Okay. Chair, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Okay. Second. I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. You have to wait 15 days for your permits. All right, let's see here. Application 6174, Poly Surveying. Your name and address, even though we get to see you periodically?
Name is John Vallis, 2600 Dolphin Street, Mobile, Alabama. Bert, you mind if I pass these three out?
Mr. Vallis, next time you come, pass them out in advance, please.
I'm sorry.
Yep. I appreciate it.
I'm just learning. Just in reviewing the staff report, it requires the applicant clearly show unusual characteristics, which I think exist for this application. This lot was part of the Midtown Publix development, and the developer created this residential lot as a requirement of the overall approval process. There was some fear early on that maybe this lot that fronts on Wilson Avenue could be used as a cut-through street or pedestrian access even, or maybe there would be some fear that somebody would come back in at a later date and try to have this zoned for some commercial application. So they agreed to create a separate legal lot of record and have it zoned residential. When they did that, on the recorded plat, they put 10-foot side setbacks on both sides, which is not a requirement of the subdivision regulations currently. So these just said they were not part of the requirements, but they now create a burden from the lot being developed to fit the character of the surrounding area. In this particular areas, in most traditional neighborhoods, there's just not 10-foot side setbacks. As you can see from one of these pictures, you know, and this isn't trick photography, but this is a property that's in that immediate area, and they'll come down to that end as well. There is no setback. If there's a 1-foot setback, I would be shocked on this property that fronts on Grand Boulevard. These are some others in that immediate area as well. Same, all throughout this neighborhood, it would almost be impossible to find houses with the setback, the requirement that is being required of this lot. The staff's comment about the need for a variance and perhaps a dwelling is inappropriate is inaccurate. In fact, the majority of the homes in this area are within a few feet of the property line. The adjoining property to the west is within 2 feet of the property line, and I'm requesting 8 and 3.8. So the adjoining structure to the east is a garage apartment that is very close to the property line. So on the east side of this property, there's a 10-foot alleyway, and this is a garage apartment that is not 10 feet off that property line, as well as a property owner to the north, to the south actually, has vacated a portion of the alleyway and has that area fenced. And not only do they have fenced what they've had vacated, but now they're storing items outside of what they currently own and fence. So they're using the alleyway for their own benefit, not only to drain their pool, but to also store some building material. I've provided the photos in the immediate area that clearly show that requiring the setbacks would be out of character for that area. If the structure I'm proposing to locate there is determined to be inappropriate, then the entire subdivision is actually inappropriate. It should also be noted that on the east side where the 3-foot 0.8 setback is located, that side would actually abut a 10-foot alleyway, which the other property owners have vacated. I know the staff report mentions that I could have that alleyway vacated and then meet the requirements. I honestly just don't have time to do that for what I'm trying to do here. So I was hoping to get a variance that would be consistent with the setbacks of those of the adjoining properties in that area. And I know it's not for sure yet, but the subdivision ordinance and the subdivision regulations are being rewritten, and there's a good chance that these setbacks would be drastically reduced for traditional neighborhoods like this in the Midtown area. So I don't think this is an uncommon request to have this in these areas.
Mr. Vallis, or maybe I read this, your intent or you're looking at actually moving a home?
I have a structure that was built in the, one structure that was built in the 50s that I'd like to move here, and you know,
Excuse me, please.
Just based on orientation.
Point of order, please.
Just based on orientation, I mean, I could rotate the house because the house is, the dimensions are in there, but if I rotated it, then I could fit within the setbacks as platted, but I just think to be better oriented to the street, I'd like to secure this variance.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant's rep?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
John, do you know, have you seen the petition?
And I have not seen the petition. I've received 2 phone calls from the 2 property owners, one that has a variance and is at 8 and 2, and another one that has had the alleyway vacated. I honestly think a lot of that petition goes back to the public's application. The calls I've received still talk about the Publix going there, talk about the Publix developer clearing the trees. I can't help that.
Yeah.
I'm not building a Publix here, and I'm not clearing trees.
Right. No, just to let you know, there's about, I hadn't counted, but maybe 4 or 5 on Wilson Avenue, and everything else is Grand Boulevard, which I frankly don't understand. And I was just wondering if you knew kind of the backstory to any of this stuff.
No, again, have you ever seen a variance? I mean, I'm asking a question, I don't know the answer. I just think this goes back to the public's development, and that they feel like a lot of them weren't happy with that process, which I can't apologize for that.
I understand.
And again, there was some clearing. There was a stop work order on the Publix project because they cleared some trees that are in this area, not on this particular lot. So I think a lot of that goes back to that project as well.
I understand.
But I would say the majority of these homes don't have the setbacks, or I can assure you they don't have the setbacks that are being required of this lot. I want to be a good neighbor. I plan to move a nice structure there. It's not, you're not saving much money when you do that. So at the end of the day, it'll be just as nice, if not nicer, than other houses on that street.
Let me address a question that maybe Mr. Metcalf was trying to pose, is that majority of these people that signed this were on Grand Boulevard, but there is approximately 6 or so that live on Wilson, and it looks like there's only about 6 homes on Wilson anyway.
There's probably only actually 3 houses on the Wilson. There's a garage apartment, if you see that, one that Blum, Angela Blum, she actually fronts on Grand Boulevard. Well, that garage apartment may actually front on Wilson Avenue. And then Mr. Jensen is my neighbor that has these, that has secured his property, has an 8 and 2 foot setback. I'm asking for an 8 and 3.8. So he signed a petition opposing essentially what they've already got.
Okay.
So again, there's only, but there are, I guess there are other houses on the north side of the street, Bert. I don't know if you want to put that up, but maybe there are 6 houses on Wilson entirely. Well, no, there's that.
Any other questions?
3.
Mr. Vallis?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
John, where's the house coming from that you're moving? Is it in character with?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is in character, yes. It was built in the 50s, red brick house. It would fit nicely.
Thanks.
So you can orient it if necessary?
I can rotate it, absolutely, because it's 40 feet, and I just have to turn it, and which I don't want to do, but I can.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The persons who are opposing, are you all in communication? Do they understand what you're trying to do?
I've only received 2 phone calls, and both, I imagine both of them on this list, but they didn't reach back out to me or tell me they're going to have a petition or ask me to meet, and I guess it was my fault. Typically, in the real estate business, I would have been more proactive in meeting people had I known there was this much concern about a variance to have my setbacks be more character of the neighborhood. I would think if I was doing something that was out of character for the area, I would expected a petition like this. But if you drive up and down that street, if you look at these photos, if Bert wants to go to some GIS maps, you can see there's nothing on that street that has 10-foot side setbacks on either side.
Okay. If you'll have a seat. Anyone in favor of this application wish to speak at this time? All right. Anyone in opposition? I need four of you raise your hand, and one by one come down here. Good afternoon. Your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. I'm Mona Hamilton. I am a resident of 167 Grand Boulevard. And I believe, although I have not seen them, I believe some of the pictures that Mr. Vallis showed were probably of my own property. I recently had some landscaping work done, and there's a temporary setback where my landscapers left some pavers, and my property literally sits adjacent from the back to where this proposal is due for the setback. So that 3.84 variance is actually my backyard, and that's where my back fence
Are you on the corner of Wilson and Grand, or are you actually just?
I'm kind of on the corner. I'm right next to the property that he discussed as the garage property.
Can you flip it to the next that shows the actual lot? No, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. We're losing the, there we go.
No.
There, so where you see where that, the 3.86 alleyway there is?
Correct.
So my property is located directly to the right of that. So that 3.84 variance actually would come right within my back fence.
Are you one of the individuals that have vacated the alleyway as part of your?
Part of my ownership of my property includes 10 feet into that alleyway. It was a purchase that was apparently made in 1992, and it was made to accommodate the building of a swimming pool, which is in my backyard.
Okay. So we do have a picture of your property, I believe.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anyway, proceed. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's okay. No, I'm glad to ask the questions because I wanted to first of all address the situation. The other note that was made about the properties that are in close proximity. So the garage building we've talked about, my property and the property directly to the right of me used to be a single, a multifamily property, right? So there were 3 different buildings that were on the lot. There was a mother that lived there was a daughter that lived next door, and the garage place was actually their garage. So that was originally one plot of land back in the early, hundreds of years ago. That was split into 3 properties, and that's why we're so close together as we speak. And we're only close together within the sides, not within the back variance, which is where we're going to generally be affected. Does that make sense?
Any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have some arguments that I'd like to make if you want to ask some questions specifically with that, but I do have a few arguments that I think are appropriate.
I'm sorry, we proceeded
Yeah.
to questions.
No problem. The biggest concern that we have about the variances is that, as you know, Mobile is very hurricane prone, and at the very back of our alleyways are the electrical poles that take all of our electricity are coming from these poles. For my property alone, there are 3 poles that exist there. Our concern is twofold. Number one, if we get into the setback variances, there's going to be absolutely no room for a power truck to come back and access through the alleyway or the easement there if in fact we were to have a hurricane or a major storm. If an electrical pole would go down, there would be absolutely no way for a truck to get back there and to actually fix our power lines. Secondly, by placing,
On the question, Mr. Chairman, on the
Sure.
question.
Yeah.
The applicant stated that this opposition to him coming in has nothing to do with this issue, but it has to do with the layout of it prior to. I guess I'm really concerned about that with
Sure, like
what
for
you're
me,
bringing
so
up.
I'm a new resident to Mobile. I actually moved recently from California, and the whole Publix movement was in place before I even joined the neighborhood. It was a decision that was decided before I even came there. I'm not opposed to the Publix. In fact, I appreciate the fact that the Publix is there, but I'm more concerned with the fact that we're trying to put a property directly right on top of my house, and that the proposed property is a 2-story house that would directly look over my property and also block the alleyway and the easement that could cause me undue burden should we have a storm, should one of those electrical poles fall.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Ma'am, I don't follow you on that. You've got a 20-foot alleyway that you have had the benefit of someone vacating half of that alley at some point.
I own 10 part of that alleyway currently.
Just yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this man is talking about putting the dwelling 3.8 feet from his property line, which means that that's 13.8 feet from your back property line.
Right.
Because there's a 10-foot left. Now, there's 20 feet everywhere else, but there's 10 feet behind your house because you encroached into that easement.
Well,
If
I
there-
didn't. There was a former
The property owner.
sale, yes.
So if there's any issue about Alabama Power getting back there, that's not changing because he's not going to be encroaching beyond his property line. The easement is still there. You're the one that's encroaching into the easement. So I think your argument about the power doesn't really fit, in my opinion. And then secondly, on the two-story, he could turn the house around and not have an issue on or requiring a variance. There's nothing that would keep him from building a brand-new two-story house there. So that's really not a valid argument. So I haven't really heard anything yet that I think is valid. I can see where you have your concerns, but as far as being applicable to this in a technical way, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Did you have additional arguments, ma'am?
Yeah, I have one additional argument, and it's that I believe this proposal is based on the potential for an economical gain. We have come privy to the knowledge of the two houses that would be potentially placed within this empty lot that are existing over on Dogwood Drive. These are the houses that Mr. Vallis has proposed to potentially move into this lot, and we believe that there's personal interest there in terms of economical gain, and would prefer that the neighborhood keep the property as legally zoned variances that would normally apply.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else?
Oh, sorry, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I am one of the people that actually inquired about buying the lot. I had a realtor who contacted Mr. Vallis, and we were shut down pretty much immediately to say that this lot is not for sale, we're currently already on contract, and he was not available to have the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we had 3 others.
Yes.
Your name and address, sir?
Ryan Hedlund, I live at 161 Grand Boulevard, so my property backs up into this easement also.
Okay, so you're adjacent to her property?
I'm down the street from her. I'm 2 doors down from her house.
Okay.
So my concern is more about setting a precedent of allowing some entity to come in after the fact and get this variance. They knew what the rules were when they bought the property, what the size of the property was when they bought it. I'm just asking that the rules that were in place at that time be enforced for them. Because if there's an allowance given here, then there will be the potential for another allowance further down the alley, further down the alley, further down the alley at that point.
Is there more vacant lots in this neighborhood than I'm aware of?
There's a B2 lot behind this R2 lot that has its property line up to the utility easement also. So I would like to see the setbacks have to be enforced for that lot as well in the future.
Let me ask you this. You say you live on this, adjacent to this alleyway?
Yes.
And how close is your personal home to the property line?
To the fence itself?
Yeah.
Are you talking about any structures or the residential structure? The house is probably about 40 feet away from the fence line.
Not the back fence line,
The back fence line. From side to side, I would say we have a driveway on one side that is 10 to 12 feet. We've got a grass area on the other side that is 10 to 12 feet.
Okay.
So we definitely have the setbacks at our house.
Is it in?
We're not out of character or.
No, that's what I was inquiring was, because it appears that, looking at the drawings, that there's some that are close to the property line, as Mr. Vallis stated. So it may not be out of character. I'm just asking you as one of the actual residents. So.
No, I mean, we have that setback at our house for sure.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Bert, do you mind going to the aerial back a few? Keep on going. Keep on going.
Mr. Millings, did you have any questions for this?
I do. Well, yeah, I do, but I wanted to get.
I didn't want to hold
I'm
you.
sorry, Bert.
We are missing a map or two from our PowerPoint show that you have in your book.
I guess
This
that's
is
the
as
one I was
close as we
looking
can
for.
get.
You know, a number of these, yeah. Doug, will you hand that to the gentleman?
He lives 4 houses south
So Doug, do you mind just handing him that for reference for just?
For me or for you?
No, I've got
Okay.
it in mine. It's just not in there. I guess my question is this: we get a fair amount of these variance requests. It seems like, especially within the Midtown area, because the historic character of those, as you can probably see on there, if you look at that aerial, I mean, the majority of these residences are close to or right on the property line. And so,
Some are and some are not, I would agree.
I mean, look at the aerial. It looks like more
Well, I live in
than
the
more
neighborhood, I
than.
know, yeah, some are and some are not. I would agree with you.
But I would say if you look at this, more are than are not, and that's what's, I guess, interesting to me. It seems like that's more in character with the neighborhood than what you're proposing. So
I think I could have brought pictures to cherry pick also. Here's one that has a setback that's allowed. If I'd have known that we were going to bring and swap pictures, then I would have done that.
But I'm not even accusing Mr. Ballas of cherry picking, because if you look at this aerial, it seems like he could go throughout that entire neighborhood and find.
I'm not to muddy the point or whatever. I think I could do the same thing and find properties in this neighborhood that are abiding by the existing rules, but more to the point, that are already there. It's the fact that this is a new property coming in, that there could be multiple structures, multiple different things that could be built there. It doesn't need to have a variance to develop something.
And in your mind, what is the harm of having that?
Setting a precedent that if people are allowed to encroach into closer and closer to the utility easement, ultimately that will allow for somebody to come closer to our property as well. I mean, it kind of goes back to why do we have the setbacks at all? Why do we need to keep these residential places, give each other this space? If we don't need 8 feet, then we don't need that rule. We don't need 10 feet, we don't need that rule.
Which is a good question, because if you look historically, it seems like these neighborhoods have worked pretty well with much closer setbacks.
That's right, but also that's just how we've developed as the city decide that this is what we want to have moving forward. Which is why I think you can't say, it seems like in the future these rules may not apply, so let's go ahead and preemptively excuse me from the rules.
That's not my position, but I know we as a board, historically, you go back and look, have given a fair amount of relief, because it does seem to be in character with how these neighborhoods were developed and how they're currently operated.
And I think that would be a fair point, as long as it's not causing a hardship to somebody else who was already there first.
Okay, all right. I think we'll conclude this part of it. Is there anyone else in the
Thank you.
audience? Yes, sir. Your name and address, sir.
My name is Marvin Jansen, and my son, I'm representing my son who owns the house at 2413 Wilson Avenue, John Jansen, and I live about a half-mile away at 110 Eleanor Street. And so I'm representing him. He's working and he couldn't be here.
We appreciate you coming on his behalf.
Thank you.
And where in relation to this property is your son's?
He is directly adjacent to it on the west side.
Okay.
In other words, if you're going up north on Grand, you make a left on Wilson, there's the garage apartment, and then there's the lot, and then there's my son's house.
Okay.
And about 6 years ago, when I was relocating down here after retiring, I'm a retired state employee and I wanted to live closer to my son when I retired, my wife and I looked at that house, the one that he had eventually bought, and I didn't buy it because there was no access to the backyard. It was 2 foot on one side, and that's been brought out, and the person who arranged for that 2 foot is right up here sitting, Cata. You can raise your hand, Cata, that's Cata. She's 92 years young. If you want to know about the history of the neighborhood, she can tell you. But she and her sister, after the house that my son owns, the original house there burned down. Robert Henderson was living there, going to school at Augusta Evans, and his house burned down, he came home. They built a new house where my son bought. We bought it from him. The 2 houses were owned by 2 sisters. They didn't mind being close together. So they put their houses just right next to each other, and there is literally 2 foot. There's a fence, and you can just barely walk up through there. So even though I can understand them doing it at that time, and I don't fault them for doing it, For us, it caused a hardship because I didn't buy that house because I couldn't get in the backyard. Now, there is about 8 feet on the other side, maybe 10, but not enough, and a big tree there. There's not enough room to put a drive through there. So, but my son did buy it, and he lived in it for the last almost a year. We rented it out a couple times before that, and it's going to be a rental. We're renting it to an orthopedic resident starting in June. But there's no access to get into the backyard. I don't think that we can use that 2-foot variance as justification for putting a 3-foot variance next door, because I think the 2-foot variance was a mistake. I also think that when they took, and Mona, I love Mona, she's a good neighbor, and she has a pool back there and a nice place, and she bought it. But I think in 1992, when they vacated that 10-foot of alleyway, I think that was kind of a mistake too. We can't reverse it now, but that was a mistake. The alley's 20 feet wide. They put the telephone poles kind of in the middle of it. Hers took 10 foot and actually maybe even a little more. Then you come over about, actually I measured it was 93 inches from the fence to where the alley ends. Okay, less than 8 feet. And in that area, there's telephone poles. There's no way a truck could get up through there. And I called Alabama Power, and I talked to Stanley Pugh. He's a senior real estate specialist at Alabama Power. And I don't know if he's here. He said he might come, but I don't see him. He could be our fourth speaker if he'd have been here. But I talked to him about it, and we talked about building a fence across the back of this lot. Because Mr. Argo, who's the developer for the Publix, John Argo, I've been talking for him for a year about buying that lot. And the latest correspondence I had, he told me in June, said, let's wait until the last quarter of this year. Well, in December, I contacted him, and he said, let's stay in touch. You know, and then the next thing I know, we're seeing this as a variance, and the lot's being sold, and a house moved on. And boy, that was a surprise, because I kind of, you know, my son would have liked to have either bought that lot, or Mona was interested in buying the lot. She's already expressed that. But the problem, one of the reasons we would buy the lot would be to allow Alabama Power to still have access to get through there. Maybe they made a mistake in '92 by moving that fence back there. If they put another fence on the property line, there's not enough room to access back there. If they build a house 10 foot from the property line, they could get through there. So for Alabama Power's sake, he would like to have access to get back to service the poles and service that area.
Can you summarize, sir, because we've hit our time limit.
Okay, all right, let me go over. So I'm opposed to that 3.84 setback. I'd like to see it stay at 10 foot. Okay, Stanley. It was mentioned that the people that signed and you guys have copies of that, I think, but the people that signed on the petitions.
Yes, sir.
It was questioned about the people who live on Grand, but the people on Grand, their backyard is right there. So that's the reason for that. And everybody that lives on Wilson has signed. All the adjacent people were signed as being opposed. And, okay.
Well, before you depart,
yeah.
Any questions of the board for this individual?
I've got one, Mr. Chairman. I'm confused. As far as the access, say for Alabama Power, you're talking about the 10-foot alley that's there currently, right? Mr. Ballas, whoever owns that lot, is going to have a property line that still exists to where it is now, and he could put a fence up on that property line, regardless of where the house ends up, whether it's 8 feet, 3 feet, or whatever.
Right.
So I'm not following the logic of getting an Alabama Power truck or somebody back there, because regardless of whether we grant the variance or not, you still have that defined 10-foot area, correct? So
that's a good point. Here's our logic on that was that 10 foot has telephone poles in the middle of it, so you've really only got a few feet.
Actually, it's 20 feet. It's a 20-foot alley with the poles right in the middle of the 10-foot separation.
Right. And but Mona's, in 1992, the city made a mistake by allowing a 10-foot
So you can only use the other
to be
side.
vacated, so there's only another 10-foot with poles in the middle, so there's less than 5 foot.
Right.
All right.
Actually, you've got several, based on these drawings, you've got at least 1, 2, 3 or 4 people that are already built out into the alley.
Well, I looked at it from both sides, and I know that Betty Swinson on the other side, she has a fence that goes back there, but she put a big swinging gate there. So after Frederick, the trucks just went through there, and they accessed part of it from the back side, and they accessed part of it from the front side. Our idea as homeowners was to keep that lot, and Mona was willing to buy it, keep the lot empty, then her fence wouldn't be a problem. None of those fences would be a problem, because
Sir,
we were going to leave it empty.
I hate to cut you short, but we've went over our time. Mr. Millings, did he address your question? Okay.
Well,
I appreciate it.
thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I do. I appreciate it. All right, have we hit, we've got one individual left? Good afternoon. Your name and address, sir?
My name is Mark Fenton. I have interest in 165 Grand Boulevard that backs up to the Vallis property. Okay. One thing I want to clarify is that, to you, Jeremy, is you would have to take the telephone poles down to get the rest of the power lines. You cannot cross B2 to enter in where his fence line, the back fence line, will be. So the telephone poles from Wilson Avenue to the end of his property line, in order to get into the center of those telephone poles, you're going to have to take 2 to 3 telephone poles down. Because 3.84 is only about maybe 4.5 feet from where this house will be and the telephone pole. No matter about the 10 foot, the majority of his 3.84 is already vacated by Mona. So between her fence and the telephone pole and his house, there was no way. You couldn't even get a golf cart between them.
Mark, let me
Okay.
ask you this, though. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, regardless of whether it's him with a 3.84 or somebody else, you still have a hard property line right there that somebody can put a fence up, which doesn't...
Oh, I'm not questioning his fence. He
Excuse
can
me.
put whatever he wants there. But if...
Sir?
Yes.
Mr. Milling, did you have a statement you were trying to make?
Well, no, there seems to be a disconnect to me of how the variance on the side yard setback relates to access, because regardless of what the side yard variance is, he still has a property line, or there, whether it's John or anybody, there's still a property line there that somebody has the right to put a fence up. And regardless of where they put those telephone poles, somebody can put a fence there and impede that access anyway. So I'm not sure how it connects with whether we grant a side yard variance that's going to inhibit access.
Well, and you're right, and I agree with that. But, you know, Mr. Vallis has made a comment. If we, the neighbors, would have heard about this and he would have discussed it with us, we wouldn't be here today, okay? Only way we found out is the variance notices. Because we're told by Argos that when the property was put up for sale, we would all have the option to put a contract in on it.
Okay. I don't
Okay.
necessarily think this board has any say in that.
No, you don't. But, you know, I will tell you honestly, the majority, even like myself personally, I wasn't planning on speaking, but we knew this was a done deal, okay? That's how we all feel. And it is not in direct result of the public's, but what has transpired with that whole development with Vallis, Argos, and Publix. I know personally mine, I was very agitated because of what transpired. So, but we understand it's going to happen, okay? But the moment that we do have power lines down, you cannot come from Old Shell. There's a bunch of woods between a certain section, the rest of the alleyway. So the only way to get in, like, to my daughter's backyard, you got to come across public property, take down the bushes that they put up to access the power lines that come into my daughter's home. So if the power company can get in between the 10-foot alleyway, more power to them, but they're going to have to take the telephone poles down to get into the middle between his back of his fence and where the woods start, unless they tear down all the woods. So, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. All right, anyone, I think we've asked already in favor. We had 4 in opposition. Anyone else that was in? Okay, Mr. Vallis, did you have, if you'll keep it brief, if you've got anything to say in response?
Again, I appreciate your time. As I guess, you know, you had 4 people speak. 3 of them expressed interest in buying the property. I'm sorry, I do have a relationship with Mr. Argo, so maybe I had an advantage to him to purchase the property. I had 2 phone calls. I told both of them they're welcome to put in backup offers. I've told them both that. They know that. That's not what you're here to discuss today. We have one property owner that, as I understand it, wants to purchase this vacant lot so he can access his backyard and be a good neighbor and provide Alabama Power continued access when they need it. I don't understand that. I'm not going to vacate the alleyway so Alabama Power can continue to service the power poles in the alleyway as they need it. I said that early on. Somebody else said we're setting precedent. This is the only vacant lot in that area. Bert, if they want to develop the B2 lot, that's not even, I guess he made some point about developing the B2 lot that would be setting some precedent there. That makes no sense whatsoever. We're not setting any precedent there. As for personal interest, I will have a personal interest because I will be acquiring a house to move there. I'm not going to apologize for having a personal interest for a lot I want to buy and for another house I'm going to buy to move there. That's what we do. I just wonder what their personal interest is. Thank you.
All right. I think this will conclude the comments and questions. Discussion of the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think everyone will agree that in the past I've been very sympathetic to neighbors that have gotten together and to either support or try to oppose an application. I've never seen one though that I think that the true reasons behind it are not related to this application. And also, but I appreciate everyone's opinion. But the people who have spoken, I didn't hear one valid argument, and most of them actually didn't frankly make any sense at all from what Mr. Milling was trying to get across. And this is not necessary for me to say that, but with all that being said, I'm move for approval.
Yeah. I have a motion to approve. Second. Any further discussion? Let me make a comment before we proceed. If Mr. Vallis wanted to vacate the alley, then that total access as the concern of the neighbors would go away. It appears that there's already a precedent been set for that with some of the other existing homeowners. So I don't think he would have a difficult time doing that. And you would lose that access through that alleyway. The alleyway is 20 feet. Now, Bert, address this question. If a property owner builds a fence or the property line, utilities still have an easement, right? For service? Using cable and power and all the other?
The fence would be on the property line, not within the easement. But I would imagine that if Alabama Power determined that they had to get down through the 10-foot segment of the otherwise 20-foot wide alley, they would work with the property owners to remove any abutting fences, do the work that they need to do, then replace the fences.
Right. That's my understanding as well.
Let me add this. The property owner, one lot, or the owner that has vacated, actually vacated 10 feet of the right-of-way, shown on the map, next door to the first lady that spoke. To legally vacate that right-of-way to the city, that property owner had to have received written consents from all utility companies. Alabama Power has already consented to vacating 10 feet of that alleyway. So apparently, Alabama Power Company did not have a concern in giving up 10 feet of that alleyway.
Okay. I know on the plot it required a 10-foot setback. What is the traditional is 8 foot, correct?
On the subdivision plat that they recorded a 10-foot setback. However, side yard setbacks are not required in the subdivision regulations. The zoning ordinance requires a combined side yard total of 20 feet with a minimum of 8 feet on one side.
So you have minimum of 8 feet?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so there's already some of the conditions in place. I have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
And I'm going to vote opposed because the applicant didn't show hardship. He could have reoriented his home to fit the lot, but the motion carries. Therefore, the variance is approved. All right, we'll move to the next application, which is 6175, 3858, 3768, 3683, 3511, 1955, and 62. Ryko Science.
Good afternoon. Jeff Winter here representing Ryko Signs, 3345 Halls Mill Road.
Okay, and Mr. Golden, I think, has recused himself. We still have 6 voting members, which gives you the supermajority for a motion. All right, your application is recommended for approval. It's a sign variance to allow a second sign wall for each tenant on a multi-tenant site in B2 neighborhood district. Normally allows 1 sign per tenant per street frontage on a multi-site. Have you seen staff's conditions?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay, and then there was something about architectural review board.
Yes, approving the signs.
Before we call for a motion or a vote on this, any questions of the board? All right, anyone in the audience wishes to speak in favor? Anyone in opposition? All right, we have none for the record. Make sure I'm on the right application here. Yeah, number 5. Bert, why is this a uniquely historic building? It's got an unusual orientation, is the way the parcel, I agree, the parcel's kind of got a unique shape to it.
Perhaps due to the fact that it is up to the property line along Sims Avenue and provides a corner architectural element that is not usually found in buildings in Mobile.
Okay.
Where the signs are proposed would be on that unique corner element of the building. And then also, between the front suites and the rear suites, I believe there's kind of a breezeway through the middle of the building as well. It provides some access, and that's also not a typical feature you would find in Mobile.
Okay. Let me look at the file real quick one more time. All right. Any questions of the board for the applicant? All right. Staff recommends for approval, subject to conditions. Chair, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve it.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right, we're on, yes, Mr. Metcalf has asked for a 3-minute recess. 5? We'll take a break for a second. I gotta stand anyway.
That's right. It's already popular. I'm gonna hold off on this. I'm gonna go and get the alley and most of the guy sits with everybody. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if I go, I won't come back. Yeah, I guess I probably don't want to.
Yeah. You have anything I wanted to say?
That's unbelievable. It usually goes the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
All right, Lisa, we're going to resume our board meeting. And we are on application 6, is that correct? This is 2540 Old Shell Road. David Roberts. Thank you for your patience.
David Roberts, 2540 Old Shell Road.
All right, and yours is recommended for approval as well for a second wall sign for a tenant and multi-tenant site. Have you seen staff's recommendations?
Yes, I did. Actually, the variance is, I guess, two-part.
Yeah, the second part, the mural, they're saying that they recommend denial. So.
Right, right. Some of the things I'd like to say about the mural, obviously being part of the Midtown development is exciting, and the transformation that's taken place is just really, really good to be a business owner in the area. A native Mobilian, actually grew up in Midtown and West Lawn, so the area is near and dear to me. And what I feel about the mural is that other than, I noticed that one of the objections to it was that it would give a disproportionate amount of advertising for my business. And I feel that more than that, what it really is a way to extend some of the artistic qualities that have taken place in downtown, beyond the downtown area, to allow a mural on the wall rather than a bold call to action type of advertising. The design is, that's the back wall of the building, and the design right above it is more abstract than a strong call to action. Just 3 simple abstract designs of yoga postures, and the sign, which you can't see very well, the business sign above the door. And I feel that it would be a really good gift to the community, extending the feel of what's happening in downtown over here on Dolphin Street. I believe the side of Greer's that has more of an abstract design on the side of their grocery store right up the street here. Just to offer something different for the area. And what we do is kind of transformational, kind of in just kind of the way that the area is transformed. Yoga can offer a lifelong benefit, and something that a mural design would reinforce to people that come there to take yoga classes and to continually be reminded of how important it is to them. And the wall design would be a gift to the community. There's been a lot of, obviously, what was going on in that area in the past before Publix was built and before the area really began to transform and be redesigned, needed it. It really did. And it's just something that I feel that is unique and would offer, rather than just something, like I said, bold that states a strong call to action of you know, buying my services, to reinforce what we do, to really reinforce it and make a good aesthetic, artistic contribution to the Midtown area.
How old is this building?
The building, I'm not sure. The building has been there for a long time. The yoga studio opened in October of 2010. I bought it in October of 2016, so about 1.5 years ago.
Bert, do you know how old the building is?
No, I just recall that it was greatly renovated when the grocery store went in. I guess it was Neiman's Midtown Market.
It was the Neiman's Midtown Market, and before that it was an auto repair facility, and I lived away from Mobile for quite a number of years and don't remember what it was before that.
But the row of buildings there along that segment of Old Shell Road are probably from the 1950s, if not older.
Yeah. It's been there a while. It was repainted recently, obviously, when the grocery store opened. They did a lot of redesign and remodeling in the area. It's still continuing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Bert, if his business name were not over the door, would this be considered a sign? Would this be sort of like Hall's Motorsports? If it didn't have the name of his business, would it not be a sign?
I believe Hall's Motorsports was instructed, or it was determined that they could not have images of
what they sell.
So this is a service that's provided, so it probably might still be considered signage.
But if they took the Sterling off there, it would be gray. The determination.
No, even if the Sterling was not on there, I believe it could still be considered signage based on the fact that the service of yoga is provided in this building. but I have been wrong in the past, so.
Well, they could be swimming.
It's all in the eye of the beholder, right?
Thank you.
All right, any further questions?
Well, I guess maybe an argument I would make to that would be that if you look at the side of Greer's, where they have like pictures of like a storefront or something like that, and then the name Greer's is also on the side of the wall. They don't have pictures of produce or, you know, meats or groceries or things like that, but.
Well, Greer's is located in a completely different zoning district, which has different standards regarding signage, and the signage that was painted on Greer's initially started without appropriate approvals, and they had to go through the process after the fact to get any signage completed on that building.
Okay. Any further questions? All right. Is there anyone else in the audience in favor of the application? Anyone in opposition? Okay. Bert, this is the same complex we had the shrimp basket, right?
Yes, they're actually abutting and share a common wall with the shrimp basket.
And that kind of ties in with your recommendation for approval. It kind of fits the same. Without the mural, that is. Okay. All right. Once again, any questions of the board? All right, sir, if you'll have a seat.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Discussion, questions of the board, comments? All right, chair entertain a motion. Staff recommends approval of the additional sign, however, and with conditions. However, they recommend denial of the mural. I'll solicit a motion from one of the members, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, what about the mural?
Staff recommendations.
Okay, so recommended to denial of the mural.
Yes.
Okay. No,
No.
we're concluded, sir.
Second.
I have a second with that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, get with staff regarding the decision, sir, if you got questions. All right, thank you. All right, we are on application 6177, 3753, and this is a review of, this is administrative appeal of a staff decision to allow construction of a new off-site parking lot to accommodate an existing medical clinic in a B1 buffer business district. Zoning ordinance allows the construction of off-site parking to accommodate existing medical clinics in a B1 buffer district. I think we have Ms. Wells here. If you'll come down to the podium, please.
And Mr. Chairman, let me point out that the medical clinic is not existing. It's an existing building. It has previously been a medical clinic. The intention is to renovate it once again to be a medical clinic, but it is currently vacant.
Okay. And sir, your name and address, please.
My name is Evans Crow. I'm here on behalf of Dorothy Wells, who lives at 134 Florence Place. And I also live at 66 Upham Street, which is not far away. And I'm here to speak on behalf of Ms. Wells. She is, as I said, she is, her property is adjacent.
Can you come closer to the mic? We have some that have a
I'm
hard
sorry.
time
Her
hearing.
property is adjacent to the subject property at 137 Tuscaloosa Street, which was acquired in January of 2017 by Pulmonary Associates. This is an 1820s home, which is individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The proposal is, and Pulmonary Associates also bought 2001 Spring Hill Avenue, which is where the former Alabama Pain Clinic was, and they proposed to put their facility in there. And what they've received approval to do is use the 137 Tuscaloosa Street property as off-site parking. That property was rezoned in 1992. However, no proper notice was filed, and no one knew about that until Pulmonary Associates filed in 2017. The The other property that is part of this is 2005 Spring Hill Avenue, which is the next door former Rite Aid. And there are some easements and a PUD that apply in this case that I feel the board should know about. In 1985, there was an easement agreement drafted between 2001 and 2005 Spring Hill Avenue, which provides shared parking for the property that Pulmonary Associates has purchased. In addition, in 2006, there was a PUD approved that also cemented that shared parking, and that PUD, as you know, does not expire. That's some of the background information. And what I'd like to say today is that the Pulmonary Associates applied for a PUD, and that PUD was granted by the Planning Commission, but the City Council reversed it in February. So they now have filed this special plan for off-site parking, which was filed on March the 7th and granted one day later on March the 8th, and that's what we're here to appeal. And it's our position that the special plan for off-site parking, which is 64-6A7, does not apply in this case. 64-6, I know I'm going to be a little technical, so I apologize for that. 64.6A2 states that generally off-site street parking is to be located on-site, not off-site. There's the 64-6- I'm going to call it subpart 7 is called a special plan for sharing off-street parking. And I would submit that subsection 7 only applies to B4 zoning and RB, which I know we don't have in town. This property, the 137 Tuscaloosa Street property is B1, so it's our position that it cannot be used as an under the special plan provision cannot be used as off-site parking. That's the first point. The next point that I'd like to make is that the special plan, by its name, requires special circumstances. And in this case, there are no special circumstances that warrant the off-site shared parking. And in fact, the opposite is true. Pulmonary Associates already has the parking that they need in the shared PUD that they have with 2005 Spring Hill Avenue. And as I understand it, a dialysis company is moving in the former Rite Aid, and so I'm sure that will assist Pulmonary Associates in using that shared parking and providing, a good parking facility for its patrons. Okay. In addition, I would say that the use of subsection 7 is inconsistent with prior practice. In her memo to the City Council, Wanda Cochran stated, and she quoted Richard Olson as stating that ordinarily the practice is to use a PUD for off-site parking, not the special plan. And the memo also says that Mr. Anderson confirmed that that is the technique that's usually used. The other thing is, because they have this other plan with the neighboring building, they have no need for off-site parking. The shared parking PUD provides 89 spaces, which is 50 more than is required for the building purchased by Pulmonary Associates. And the last thing I would say is that in 1992, this was rezoned from R1 to B1. However, at that time, the city clerk and the planning department show that no notice was ever provided to any of the neighbors. And so it would be our position that that rezoning to R1 from B1 was improper, and if it's not proper, then the subsection 7 does not apply at all.
Okay. Any questions to the board?
One concern, Mr. Chairman, I keep hearing the bell going off, and I would ask of the chair that we suspend the rule on time, because I want to really understand this, because it's been very, very impactful in a lot of ways.
I've been liberal with the time, and I never did ask you to discontinue your comments. But if you will summarize it, I think that
I think the
Mr.
summary
Davis is correct.
The summary is that the subsection 7 does not apply because it applies to cases of B4 zoning, not B1 zoning. The other thing is, because of the shared plan, there is no need for off-site parking. They already have it with the next-door neighbor at 2005, and it provides 90 spaces, which is 50 more than they need for 2001 Spring Hill Avenue. Then the other point that I make is this subsection 7 is it's called a special plan, and I would argue that this is not a special plan at all because they already have the parking they need. I suppose they just want the other parking. That is not. There are no special circumstances warranting the demolition of a building that is on the National Register of Historic Places just for the fact that they want it, because it does not meet the standards of 64-6A7. And then the other thing is that if the 137 Tuscaloosa Street property was improperly rezoned from B1 to R1, then the ordinance doesn't apply at all.
Well, sir, I can't state whether or not it was improperly because I don't think it's a function of this board to review that part of it.
I understand I'm pointing that out for your edification, but and I'm merely quoting from Wanda Cochran's legal memo that she submitted to the City Council when this issue was taken up by the City Council.
Okay. Thank you again. Any questions? Yes. Mr. Metcalf.
You mentioned, sir, about 89 spaces.
Yes.
Is that 89 spaces that are at the OK&B?
Plus the 39, I believe, that are at 2001 Spring Hill Avenue, which is Pulmonary Associates, the building that Pulmonary Associates bought.
Not according to this site plan. Looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, about 9 spaces on that particular site plan.
According to, I think the total is 89.
Okay, total of what? Between both properties?
2001 Spring Hill Avenue and 2005.
Okay, so your statement about that they, meaning the Pulmonary property, would have 89 spaces, that's not true because it's shared. They don't have access to all of their spaces under a shared parking arrangement.
I'll have to check and see if.
My understanding, you said that'll be a dialysis clinic, at least that's what's proposed, where the old K&B or Rite Aid.
Somebody just told me that. I don't know that to be the case.
Or whatever the purpose of it, I'm not sure. Does the MOU or the PUD continue with the property? Or is that something the new property owner could withdraw?
The parking agreement, I think Evan said, was in 1985. I read it when all this was going on with the Planning Commission. I think it is not forever. There were some conditions on it that one party could terminate it when something happened. I just don't recall what that was.
So there's no guarantee that
I would agree with that statement. There's no
Okay.
guarantee.
Yep.
Yes, and Mr. Chair, also, just to clarify, sir, you said that talking about demolishing a house, is the house planned on being demolished or moved?
I've heard, I just got involved in this last week, and I understand that there's been some discussions about moving the house.
Well, I think it would be,
but I don't
I think it'd be
know.
appropriate.
Let him finish the statement. Go ahead. What was your comment, sir?
I understand that there have been some discussions about moving the house, but whether that's going to take place, I don't know.
Okay, well, my point was, sir, that if you don't know that's the case, then maybe we shouldn't have been told that's what's going to happen to it. So that's not necessarily the case. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know that to be the
Okay,
case.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any further questions of the board? All right. Anyone else in favor of this appeal? Please come forward. Thank you, sir. Sorry, I didn't catch it. Good afternoon. Your name and address for the record.
My name is Dorothy Irvine Wells, and I have lived at 134 Florence Place for the past 40 years. Last October 19th, 2017, Pulmonary Associates filed an application for a new off-site parking lot to accommodate an existing medical clinic. This is not an existing medical clinic. It's a vacant building, and all along it has been very misleading, deceiving the public, trying to deceive me, and they still use it throughout the whole process since October 19th of last year. And they still haven't stopped using that existence. Even though I have written to Richard Olson, it never stopped. He's using the same language, which is inappropriate, incorrect.
Can I ask you a question? I want you to lose your train of thought.
Okay.
Was it a medical clinic at one point?
It was at one point,
Okay.
but they said...
How long ago? 2 years? It was a pain clinic, I think, at one
Yes,
time.
it was, pain
Okay, so,
clinic.
how long before it loses its it wasn't really non-conforming use, though? Okay. All right. Proceed. I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Okay. And they went to, my property adjoins the backyard of 137 Tuscaloosa Street. It gives one the impression that it's a vacant lot and that they want off-site parking to accommodate that so-called existing medical clinic. It looks like the medical clinic's in existence and they need more parking places to accommodate, or it wouldn't go through. And so right now they have proposed an off-site parking lot where this 1835 historic home is, with many large trees, gigantic trees. And you've seen pictures of the photos that I had taken.
Yeah, by the way, we have pictures here. I want to
Okay.
point out for the record that if any of you wish to see them. Thank you.
Okay. Pulmonary Associates with the new site parking lot at 137 Tuscaloosa Street. It has that historical home on there. And so they want that parking lot to replace the historic home as well as the many, many trees, large trees that are on there. I want to bring up that in 1989, 137 Tuscaloosa Street file with Carol Wilkerson, it was documented that a dentist's office wanted to locate 350 feet south of the application, 137. And it was denied to be rezoned from an R1 to a B1. And I want to make the correction that it was not in 1992 when the rezoning from an R1 to a B1. That occurred in 1990. And I have a copy of the application, and Ms. Carol Wilkerson filled out the application, but there were no names listed. It said, see attachment. I have the documents right here, and you should have them too. I submitted them. And no names were there, only the attachment, and that was a letter to Ms. Wilkinson, who owns 137 at that time. And it just was addressed to her from Mary Ann Merchant when the meeting was going to be taking place for the rezoning. No, I did not get a notice, the required notice, which should be protocol, to receive those notices within 300 feet of the application. I didn't get them. Eric Caracalino didn't get them. Neighbors across the street have been there longer than they didn't get them, and they're not listed on the application form. And on the application form, it mentions that if it's incomplete, then it's null and void. And so therefore, if we didn't have the notice to object or not to object, and I would have objected, of course, and others would have too, then it would not have been zoned to a B2. Why would it be zoned, denied in 1989, and then all of a sudden, the next year, it's zoned B2? And there were neighbors across the street that did not receive notices. Al Caracalino didn't receive a notice, but his name is in the minutes. I have them here, and you should have them too. His name is in the minutes where he did not object to having it rezoned to a B1. That was in 1990. I have also documents here where William Frost, he was my neighbor, 136, and he has in the minutes, they wrote down the minutes, he says, I don't know how this became a B1. If he had known that, he would have had more opposition. So something is not right. And I wanted to mention too, Al Caracalino can talk to you about this. And then I wanted to mention about the CEO of Pulmonary Associates of Mobile. I just found out in one of the last meetings, in spite of the application coming from 6701 Airport Boulevard, Pulmonary Associates, I thought it sounded like the patients were coming from there. But no, they're coming from the Mobile Infirmary. They're on the 4th floor. I worked there. And last night, before I went to work, I went up to the 4th floor. And as soon as you get off of the elevator, it has 410 suite.
Can I get you to, you've got a lot of facts for us, a lot of history.
I really do.
You do. But I've got to kind of focus on why this appeal, why you're appealing the staff's decision as it relates to it being considered off-site parking under its current zone. We don't have any say in the matter why it was, as far as I can understand, why it was rezoned back in 89 or 8, when you feel that you weren't given proper notice?
Correct.
I mean, none of us were on this board at that time. We don't have any say regarding what they did back then.
But that's why we keep documents.
Yeah, I understand that. But I'm not sure today, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Anderson for clarification, that we have to focus strictly on whether or not the staff made the correct decision allowing off-site parking based on its current assigned zoning. How they got to that assigned zoning is, I think, a different issue.
I'll discuss that later.
Yeah, I'm going to let Mr. Anderson.
But then if it was an R1, then I wouldn't be going through all this.
Well, you might, but most likely we wouldn't have an administrative appeal. You're correct in that.
But that's what I understand about the administrative appeal. I won 2 appeals, one with planning and one with city council. And then there's wiggle room for Pulmonary Associates to put in another application. Then it goes back to the planning and zoning, and I had to pay $200, and I don't understand that part. But all the language has changed.
I'm going to ask several questions of Mr. Anderson, one of which, okay, first of all, the planning approved this, correct, Mr. Anderson? Or Bert? Okay, Planning Commission approved this.
They approved the plan unit development, and then staff approved the special parking plan.
Okay, now, what about City Council?
I've got a whole 5-minute speech to tell you about the history of this. I was going to wait until all the speakers.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure you understood our role in this. I don't want to mislead
But can
you.
it be investigated? I mean, it seems to me that's a very, very important matter.
No, I don't disagree with you, because we've read through a lot of the correspondence ourselves. And as you stated, there's files of information on all this. But I got to kind of stick to, for time,
Okay.
we got to stick to the basis of this.
This pertains to the CEO, Mrs. Zerflot, I don't know his spelling, but he said, he's at the 410 Infirmary Medical Center. I work there too. I'm med tech there on the 3rd floor. He's on the 4th floor. And so when I went upstairs, here it has a sign on the wall, oh, there's parking this way. So it's all one floor, basically. If they drive to the second floor, second plank where the parking is, they just have to walk down the hall to Pulmonary Associates.
Well, how does it relate to this property?
Well, because he said that, they wanted to be all on one level, and that it makes it tough for the patients to get around. There's a note, and he was here too. But also, if the patients don't want to drive to the second level of the parking, then they can go through the main beautiful entrance, the atrium entrance, and they can walk just little ways, go.
So he explained why he wants to use this property?
Yeah, that's what he said, yes.
Okay.
And that's what he said.
Well, let me ask you a question. Well, I've got it on my list. When it was the pain clinic, how was the parking as it related to the pain clinic? Did you have on-street parking and people parking on the sidewalks?
I don't remember that.
Okay. I actually have personal experience with this.
They had the shared parking with the Rite Aid.
They actually parked everywhere they could find a parking spot.
Right.
I actually had an employee that I provided a ride there, and I couldn't figure out how to get off the parking lot because everything was blocked. So I kind of relate to the fact that there's very limited parking on this site. So I didn't even know about the agreement with the adjacent property. I didn't know that was an option.
But I don't want to pave parking lot at the end of my backyard.
Oh, I understand
And
your point.
and that's part, because I have a high point in my backyard, and water, I was always wondering why the water would just rush down. It's because a contractor built my garage has said, did you know your property is on an incline? And I said, no. And that's why the water, it keeps coming down, and sometimes it can flood the street. And so, yeah, I fear about that.
Well, the site plan shows a retention pond that would abut your property line.
But those retention ponds can attract rodents, and they could get clogged up, and could even be worse.
True.
And then home property values.
I'm sure that that's a possibility as well. Okay. Do you have anything else before we ask for some of your, I think you have some others here in the audience in favor of it as well?
I'm just confused with, and unhappy with the language, misleading. You know, it makes you think that, oh, there's a parking lot that we're going to share now. And that's a wooded area where that house is behind my backyard, at my backyard. Many large trees.
Yeah, it's a beautiful neighborhood. I agree.
And that's what I'm concerned at. This is my home, this is my neighborhood, and why didn't they buy Rite Aids? They could have had all the parking lot right there. Why did they have to interrupt
all right.
my area?
Ms. Wells, let me ask the board if there's anyone that has questions for you.
I've got a question for
Mr. Burrows.
Ms. Wells, is there a proposed privacy fence between your property and that parking lot?
No, I don't. There's a wall, like a 4 or 5 foot wall.
Would that matter to you?
What?
Would that matter to you if there was a proposed privacy fence?
I don't understand what you mean.
I think there's a requirement.
Privacy. Between you and the parking lot, ma'am, a privacy fence.
There was one proposed.
Would you like one?
I don't want a parking lot.
Would that make a difference to you if there was a 8-foot privacy fence separating your yard from
that was proposed. I would rather not have the parking lot because I feel as though it's an R1.
We understand that, ma'am, but what I'm trying to do is seek a possible alternative for you that you might agree with. Like an 8-foot privacy fence separating that property?
No, there is not one there.
I understand that, ma'am. I'm asking you, would that be in your favor? If you would you be okay?
One is proposed if there is a parking lot that goes there, but I don't want a parking lot to go there.
The approval the city staff gave in this application requires an 8-foot high privacy fence.
Just trying to help out with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burrows. Any other questions of the board? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wells. And we may have more questions for you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else in favor of the appeal wish to speak at this time? And we're trying to be fair to everyone, give you ample time to speak, so please be considerate of, if somebody's already made a statement that you can add to, that would be helpful. If not, then we'll kind of summarize it. Take your time, sir.
You have to bear with me, I'm a little messed up with
Your name and address.
My name is Al Caraglino. I live at 138 Florence Place. I've been here before and I've submitted information before. This thing has gone on and we have found, Dottie's done all the work and found a lot of information. There really is no reason for this parking lot. But the big thing is they're going to put a 50-foot wide retention pond right up against the fence against our property. I can't stand still for that. I'm a decorated veteran from the Vietnam War. And I have a violent nature that I was trained in, which I'm not making any threats, but my temper does get really up when I
Well,
see
we hope you
this-
don't show it today.
Pardon?
I hope you don't show it today. Thank you.
No, well, I was one of the first Green Beret teams that went into Vietnam, so you know what we went through.
Well, can you tell us why?
But the retention pond that they're planning, if you look on their plan, it's huge. It's going to be right up against our fence. Everybody knows those things grow, I mean, they're magnets for mosquito larvae. They grow mosquitoes, and those are a health problem. You get snakes, rats, raccoons, possums, whatever. And if they would even consider a French drain, it would be a good idea. But we can't go there because the city doesn't tell them how to build it. But that's my biggest point, is that they're putting a parking lot where they really don't need one. And now that we found out that the agreement with the shared parking there with the other building that used to be Rite Aid, there's plenty of parking. I've seen that place filled. You know, the pain clinic was there, and you mentioned that you said you couldn't hardly get around. Some days that does happen. I don't know what was going on, but there were some days that the parking lot was just filled up. But on a normal day, I've seen it because my gate opens to the back parking lot there. The other thing is they're talking about a wooden fence. Well, I'm already having a problem with that. With the Rite Aid people, they put up the wooden fence when they came. If you look at it now, it's falling apart and they're not maintaining it. If the parking lot does win and they put it up, I would suggest they put up a concrete wall because they're not going to maintain that wooden fence, and especially a shadow box fence I'm familiar with. I built one myself. You've got a space between your boards, so it really is not a totally privacy fence, and it doesn't knock out any sound from the parking lot. And Ms. Wells works at night, so the parking lot noise would be detrimental to her sleeping in the daytime. Like I said, my main problem is that retention pond. I just can't stand still for it.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
I'm also thinking that, you know, if we lose, I may have to mortgage my house to do it, but I would file an injunction.
We appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would you just mind if I address the gentleman there real quick?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Metcalf has a question or a comment.
No, I was just going to say, sir, that I understand what you're saying, but your concerns about the detention pond is not something that we can address here. The detention pond location and size is determined by city engineering, okay? Has nothing to do with us. Also, today in the city, when a detention pond is put in place, the city makes the owner enter into a maintenance agreement with the city that says that it will be maintained. See, before they didn't do that, so there wasn't any teeth in trying to enforce the maintenance of detention ponds because they got out of control. Today, there's some teeth in that enforcement. So if they build that parking lot there, and if the detention pond is not being maintained, you call the city, and I'm assuming that they would get on that. And I think the same thing could be with the fence. So anyway, I just didn't want you to think that whatever action we take here, that we didn't listen to your concern. We're just not in a position to to address your particular concerns, the ones that you mentioned.
Like I said, I don't want the parking lot at all, but,
Right, I
you know,
understand.
if, in fact, we can't, you know, stop it, that retention pond was a big thing with me as far as that, because, like you said, I didn't know that the
I
city
understand.
had changed, because I.
And that is true, isn't that correct, Bert?
I would defer to Mr. Davis on that, and he's preparing to answer.
Yes, sir, it is true. We do make property owners file a maintenance agreement for their detention facilities. And any complaints that we receive, we do go out and investigate and get with the property owner, try and get them to maintain it.
Thank you.
Thank you again, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we have room for the fourth, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The gentleman's going back upstairs. Did I hear you say you were a Vietnam vet? You a Vietnam veteran?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for your service.
Yes.
I'm a Vietnam vet too. So.
I am too.
Your name and address, sir.
George Brew, 1956 College Court, and I'm a Vietnam veteran also. But my property extends 115 feet across the length of the parking lot, proposed parking lot. So I have a pretty broad expanse across. And I had objected to the parking lot, which I still do. I don't want a parking lot there. But if the parking lot is built there, like Al Caraglino said, we want something to buffer the noise and also privacy. I don't know, at first they talked about a 6-foot fence. If they put up a 6-foot fence, would that suffice? And my opinion was no. It would have to be at least an 8-foot fence. And my suggestion was that it'd be like a board on board where it would be more private. And then they came up with the shadow fence. And the only problem with the shadow fence is you know, you don't think about these things till you get home. But a shadow fence, what happens, they have to put boards on one side and then come around on the back and put more boards. So how are they gonna put boards on the back if that's on my property? You know, they would have to come onto my property and put boards on the back unless the fence was set back 2 feet off the property line. And at now, present, I have a 6-foot chain link fence all the way across, all the way around my whole half acre, which is right below that blue spot there. The second blue spot, the lower blue spot, right there, that's my half acre. And my house is right behind that. So I have my house, and then behind my house, I have the half acre that I do gardening, and we do astronomy and things like that back there. So, and I'm there every day. Plus, I have 3 dogs that live there with us. And if they tear down the chain link fence to put up the privacy fence, you know, my concern is what happens to the bottom under the, you know, if they tear the chain link fence down, because I don't see how they could put up a fence, a wooden fence, without tearing the chain link fence down, since it's going to be right on the property line. If it was set back 2 feet, then they could get around to put on the boards and maintain the boards. But if it's right on the property line, there's no way they're going to be able to do it without me doing it. That's what I foresee. I would probably be the one doing it, and you know, to maintain.
So your primary concern is the way the fence is constructed and whether there's a parking lot there at all? Is that
right? Yeah. I mean, I don't want a parking lot, but you know, if it became that, you know, you have to look at some of the things coming ahead, and because I want, you know, privacy as much as anything. I've already spent, you know, probably $1,500 planting trees there just in case it does pass. I mean, I planted 15 Carolina cypress to get 20 feet tall, and I planted bottle brush trees. I've been digging for 2 months, you know, because I like to look ahead. So I didn't have a tractor, I did it by hand. And, but the fence portion, you know, I had requested the board on board, but I'm assuming the reason they didn't want the board on board because of the wind, the wind factor coming across, and that the shadow box gives a little protection for the wind could come through the fence.
Sure.
Of course, you know, a concrete block would be the, you know, definitely the best thing, but we requested that, and nobody seemed to think it was feasible or cost effective. But yeah, that's that and the lighting were two of my main concerns if the so-called you know, parking lot was built.
Any questions of the board or the neighbor?
Just one comment on the fence. Well, I would, you know, on the fence proposal, I wasn't limiting it to a shadow box. In other words, you could put just the broad-based privacy fence or anything like that up there. In other words, I wouldn't restrict it to a specific type fence. I just wanted to see what Ms. Wells had to say about that proposal, that's all.
Yeah, well, you know, if it came down to a fence, I mean, I didn't think about it when they told me that they were going to put an 8-foot privacy fence, but it was going to be a shadow box. And I didn't, until I got home, I didn't think about what the effects of that would be. You know, there'd be boards on each side, and how are they going to maintain the boards on my side of the fence? So if they put up a 8-foot fence that wasn't, you know, that was board on board, you would get a lot more privacy, even though you would have a little bit of, you know, more wind effect that may damage it. It may have to have a little.
Sir, you mentioned lighting, and one of the, I think the conditions in what I seen in some of the earlier documents was that the lights are off at a certain time.
Yes, that's been addressed.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
All right. That concludes the comments in favor. How about opposition? Are you gentlemen here in opposition? Your name and address, sir?
My name is Larry Smith. My address is 1 South School Street in Fairhope. I'm the civil engineer for the project, and I want to first start back at the approval process, make sure everybody's clear on how we got to this point. We applied for a PUD. That's what the staff had recommended for us when we first started looking at this property, is to come in for a PUD because we could not get the adjacent property to amend the existing PUD. Then we came in with our own PUD, and that was that staff recommendation. That was approved with conditions, and it was all conditions that we put on ourselves to help with the concerns of the adjacent property. We agreed to do an 8-foot privacy fence. You know, we put shadow box on there after the meeting, talking with planning. We weren't sure what he meant by privacy fence, so we assumed shadow box. It does not have to be a shadow box for us. If they want board on board, it's actually cheaper and easier to build. So we're fine with doing a board on board versus a shadow box. We agreed to do the dark sky compliant light fixtures and also put those on a timer so the astronomy classes that he likes to offer would not be impacted. It's a doctor's office, so they don't have late hours. And so we agreed to put a timer, and that we put that condition in on ourselves, and that's in the site plan that was presented. And so we got the PUD approved. It was appealed. City Council heard the appeal. The appeal did not have enough votes to pass, and so after the meeting, we were told that we can move forward. Then after a technicality, because there was not a motion in the affirmative, and I'm sure he can speak in lawyer ease a little bit better than I can on how that happened, we had to come back to the City Council. In that City Council meeting, there was concern about not being a statement of facts as to why the PUD was approved, and that's why they voted to send it back to Planning Commission. That vote wasn't them being opposed to the PUD, they just wanted to make sure all the avenues were followed correctly. And so then after the meeting, we're told that there was an opinion by the City Council attorney that we actually shouldn't even go for a PUD, but we should go for this special parking plan. And that's what we did. We were just doing what we were asked to do. And so we filed that. It was approved, and now this appeal that was brought before y'all. As far as the availability of parking, when my client purchased the property, they went to the KB drugstore property owners and asked for an extension of that agreement, the parking agreement, because it expires in 8 years. They said no, with the property being listed, that they did not want something to encumber the property for a long period of time, and so they would not extend it, and that's what led to the purchase of the Tuscaloosa property. Trying to think of the other statements on. So that's how we ended up with this PUD scenario. As far as the other concerns that were brought up, you know, the detention, we're required to do detention. All the water that comes into that detention pond is piped over to Tuscaloosa. Engineering's actually already reviewed it. I believe we've got all comments addressed on that. It is a dry pond. It will be wet for a maximum of 24 hours, and it'll be dry again, and that's just the holding period as it's being slowly released. As far as the trees on the property, as you can see, all those green blobs on there represent the trees. We built this parking lot around those trees. There's actually one tree that's shown on there, and I believe it was Mr. Brew brought to my attention that it was a dead tree, so one of those trees will most likely come down, and that's the one to the south next to the detention pond. And I told him if it's a dead tree, then we'll gladly remove it as part of the construction. So as far as the use goes, we don't have access to the K&B parking lot. It will definitely be gone in 8 years, but we have no remedy to actually get them to upgrade it. There's potholes all through the parking lot. Access has already been cut off. And so we're looking long term, and we need parking available for the medical clinic.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishes to speak in opposition to the appeal? Good afternoon. Your name and address?
Don Bowden, 1657 Spring Hill Avenue. I'm the architect for the project. And I would like to address the house that is currently located on Tuscaloosa Street. That is a historic property, but it's not in a historic district. We have had 2 families eager to move it. One now is under contract awaiting this approval to move it. That's all set. We had at no time has my client mentioned demolishing that property.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Don, do you know, prior to your client purchasing the property, was that house occupied? Has it been vacant? Do you know?
It was occupied, and I don't know the full history, but I believe the occupant died, and then our clients bought it, but I don't know the time period between that. And then in terms of the office, the medical office building, it was built as a medical office building and has always been a medical office building. I'm sure it would still be operated today if the 2 previous owners were not in prison.
Do you know much about the history of the property?
Just what I read through the various PUDs over the years.
Okay. I'm just curious at what, well, Mr. Anderson will clarify all this. I'll defer to him in a minute. Okay, any questions once again? All right, thanks, sir. All right, anyone else in opposition to the appeal? All right, it appears we'll conclude our comments. Mr. Anderson, can you enlighten us on all the history?
Thank you. A lot of the questions that did come up were addressed by Mr. Bowden and the engineer. As far as the 1990 zoning, certainly that's not before you. You don't have the legal right. Only a judge has the legal right to undo that rezoning. What the city file shows, it does not show that notice was not given. It does not show, it doesn't prove that it was. It was, the application's there, it says see attached, and the attachment's not in the file. 28 years ago, apparently that was, and we can't find the box that has all that information. So anyway, that's only up to a circuit court judge to undo that 1990 rezoning. This is called a special plan, but the zoning ordinance does not set out any special criteria to classify it as a special need or special circumstances that have to be proven before you can approve it. This is the first time this
Is it limited to?
section.
Is it limited to a B4 or is it?
No, sir. If you look in 7A, is very confusing. You have to read it about 10 times. It addresses what can be in certain districts and what can't be. And if you read it in its entirety several times, you realize that it does apply to, this is B1 or B2, B1 classifications. Rick Olson and I, and Wanda Cochran, the city council attorney, and I went over that and confirmed that. That is our interpretation. When it did get to city council, the PUD appeal, it was, the approval was overruled, the appeal was upheld because the new city council attorney, in her opinion, just thought that the PUD ordinance required that there be a finding of fact that the council rely upon in making its decision. It was not the PC's practice to give that finding, so they were going to go back to the PUD, to the Planning Commission for another PUD. During that time, Ms. Cochran, the council attorney, told Rick Olson and myself, why don't they just use this section here for a special plan? You can do it without the PUD. And yes, I have said, and everybody has said, that typically this is done through a PUD. Historically, that's the way we've always done it. But this is legal. It's just there's never been a need, I guess, to go this route. So when we decided that was the route to go, Mr. Olson and I came up with an application, or Rick came up with the application. I approved it, and the applicant submitted it, and the staff reviewed it and decided it was proper under that section and approved it with the conditions that are set out on page 4 of the staff report, which were, I believe, and Bert can correct me, were the same conditions of approval of the PUD by the Planning Commission. So every precaution has been taken to protect the neighbors as if the PUD had been approved. In closing, I would say I take offense to Ms. Wells' comments that the city and the staff misled and deceived the neighbors. Ms. Wells called Rick Olson in the last 2 months before his retirement daily. I would get emails from Rick daily saying Ms. Wells needs to know this, Ms. Wells has a question about this. Staff bent over backwards to provide information and explain and do the best they could, and I'm sorry she feels misled.
Okay, will you help just clarify again the role
Get
of
your microphone, I'm sorry, with this air conditioner going, I can't hear.
The role of this board is only to consider the appeal of the staff's decision to authorize this special condition.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And not to consider fact as to what occurred in 1989 or 90.
That's absolutely correct.
That was for the city council and everyone else to sort out.
To hear and decide appeals where it is alleged by the appellant that there is an error in any order, requirement, permit, decision, or refusal made by the zoning administrator or other administrative office. This is an appeal of the staff's decision to grant or allow this parking lot zoned properly for a parking lot. So your role is to determine if the staff made an error in granting this application only.
Okay. Any questions of the board for Mr. Anderson? For any additional clarification or questions? Pardon? Comment? Yes, Mr. Coleman.
To those of you who are in opposition to it, one of the things that I'm concerned with is the ability to compromise a little bit. You got 3 people that you can sit down and talk to and make things work. Compromise doesn't have to be 50-50, it just has to work. Decide what's best for you and what would be best for them, and make you all feel that you're doing something right. probably just needs to be talked to. I suggest that you do that.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, all right. To uphold the staff's decision would be a denial of this appeal, correct?
Appeal, right.
All right, so a motion would be to deny, a motion to uphold would be to approve.
No.
Right, so I want to make sure everybody's clear on that, because this is a little different than our usual round of motions.
Say it again, Mr. Chairman.
If you're in agreement with staff's decision, then you would deny the appeal. If you're in approval of Ms. Wells' appeal, then you would approve it. Okay, I want to make sure we're clear on that. All right, Chair, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
I believe that the applicant has failed to demonstrate cause to overturn the staff's decision, and I think they've actually made it clear that their real problem is that they just don't want the parking lot. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about an appeal of the staff's decision. I think that from what our council has told us and what we've read, at least what I have, I move to deny her appeal.
Second.
Okay, the chair has a motion to deny. Do I have a second?
Second, yeah.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. All right, Mr. Anderson, do we have any other business today?
You always ask about the Temple Lodge. We do have some movement on there. We have a hearing set in about 2 or 3 weeks on the applicant's motion for summary judgment. So we have some movement.
Okay, do we have any other court actions that?
The MW signage is in court, and I
Which
think
one?
the MW signage, which is up on the interstate service road, the orange welding, I believe that is in court, and I believe there's supposed to be a hearing later this month, perhaps next week.
Okay, any others?
There was I think as Bert mentioned last time, there was an appeal of the Halls Mill Road, that school where y'all approved or denied aggregate parking on that driveway across the baseball field. They appealed that to Superior Court.
Okay. For future, can you all at our meetings kind of have already a summary of those for us? Because our memory will slide as well. I forget which ones to ask about. Well, thank you. And, pardon? Okay. All right. Any other discussion of the board? I sent a note to all of you because it was brought to our attention about attendance, that if you think maybe, be more definitive, because we have some of the applicants that are, obviously we had recusals today, and it could affect whether or not they get a fair chance at a variance request. Let us know. The staff's had some discussion about having supernumeraries to fill in during those recusals or absence. That may be warranted if we continue to have those situations. I think everything else is kind of went by the wayside at the moment, right? So, all right. Well, that's all I have. Motion to adjourn.